Imagine an ATM on a quiet street corner in Kyiv. It's late, and the city's asleep. Suddenly, the machine whirs to life. It isn't rejecting a card or processing a normal withdrawal. Instead, it starts spitting out cash. Bills flutter onto the pavement, one after another, like a slot machine that just hit the jackpot and won't stop. There's no card in the slot. No one has entered a PIN. A figure emerges from the shadows, calmly gathers the stacks of money, and melts back into the night. This wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't a scene from a movie. This was the opening act of one of the most audacious, sophisticated, and successful bank robberies in history. It was a heist that didn't need masks, guns, or getaway cars. All it required was a keyboard and an internet connection. For years, a mysterious cybercriminal group known as Carbanak operated like a ghost in the global financial system, hitting over 100 banks across more than 30 countries. They turned ATMs into their personal cash dispensers and manipulated account balances with a click, siphoning off so much money that authorities still can't agree on a final number. Estimates start at $300 million and climb as high as $1 billion. This wasn't a robbery of customers. It was a direct assault on the banks themselves. This was a crime that redefined the very idea of a bank heist and sent a shockwave through the financial world, forcing it to confront a terrifying new reality. The bank vaults were no longer made of steel. They were made of code, and they were wide open. This is the inside story of the billion-dollar digital bank robbery and the global manhunt for the ghosts who pulled it off. It all started as whispers, a string of strange anomalies that, on their own, just seemed like minor, explainable issues. In one city, an ATM would be found empty, but its logs showed no record of large withdrawals. In another, a bank's daily books would be off by a few $1,000s, a difference written off as a simple clerical error. These were tiny digital ripples in a vast financial ocean, too small and too scattered to be seen as part of a pattern. Bank managers were baffled. Security teams ran diagnostics and found nothing. They suspected inside jobs, interviewed tellers, and scoured security footage, only to hit a dead end. The money was just vanishing. It was as if the banks were haunted, their systems plagued by a phantom that left no trace. The first real clue emerged from Eastern Europe. In 2014, a bank in Kyiv, Ukraine, finally threw up its hands. It was hemorrhaging money from its ATMs and had no logical explanation. The bank called one of the world's top cybersecurity firms, Kaspersky Lab, bringing in digital detectives to solve the mystery. When the Kaspersky team arrived, they expected to find a familiar kind of ATM malware, like Tyupkin, which required a criminal to physically insert a bootable CD into the machine. But when they looked at the affected ATMs, they found nothing. The machines were clean, no malicious software, no physical tampering, nothing to explain how they were being told to dispense cash. The ghost was proving elusive. The investigators widened their search, moving from the ATMs to the bank's internal network, and that's where they found it. Buried deep inside a computer used by a bank administrator was a piece of malware they'd never seen before. It was sophisticated, stealthy, and completely new. It was a backdoor, a secret digital tunnel that gave its creators almost unlimited access to the bank's inner workings. They named it Carbanak, a mix of Carburp, the malware it was based on, and the word bank. As Kaspersky dug deeper, they made a chilling discovery. The Kyiv bank wasn't the only victim. By cross-referencing digital signatures and communication methods, they started connecting the dots. The same ghost was haunting banks in Russia, Germany, China, and according to their report, even the United States. The investigation exploded from a single incident into a global cybercrime pandemic. The problem was far bigger than anyone imagined. Over 100 financial institutions were being targeted in a coordinated, ongoing attack. Each individual bank robbery was surgical, with losses from $2.5 million to as much as $10 million per heist. But altogether, it was a billion-dollar operation. The whispers had become a roar. A multinational gang of hackers, working from the shadows, had declared war on the global banking system, and for the longest time, nobody had even known the battle had begun. So, how did they do it? How did one group of hackers bypass the multi-million-dollar security systems of over 100 banks? The answer is terrifyingly simple. It didn't start with a brute force attack or a complex piece of code that shattered firewalls. It started with an email. Their weapon of choice was called spear-phishing. Unlike regular fishing, which is like casting a wide net hoping to catch any fish, spear-phishing is like using a harpoon on a specific, high-value target. The Carbanak gang didn't send millions of generic spam emails. Instead, they did their homework. They identified specific bank employees, often in administrative roles, and crafted an email that looked perfectly legitimate. Imagine you're a bank employee. An email lands in your inbox from what looks like a colleague in another department. The subject line is something boring, updated staff roster or invoice for office supplies. The tone is professional. The sender's name is familiar. Attached is a Word document or a SPPL file. It seems like just another part of the daily grind. You click it. For a moment, nothing happens. Your computer doesn't freeze. No weird pop-ups appear. You might see the document you were expecting, or maybe just a blank page you dismiss as a glitch. You move on with your day, completely unaware that you have just opened the main gate and welcomed a Trojan horse into the fortress. The moment that file opened, it exploited a known vulnerability in Microsoft Office. This let it run a tiny piece of code, a shellcode, whose only job was to install the main payload, the Carbanak malware. Once installed, Carbanak was designed for absolute stealth. It would copy itself into a system directory, disguise itself with a common file name like spfochost.exe, and set itself to run automatically on startup. The original file you clicked was deleted, erasing the point of entry. To any antivirus software or IT admin, the Carbanak malware was virtually invisible, just another process humming along in the background. The malware itself was a crafty piece of criminal engineering. It was a backdoor based on the source code of an older banking Trojan called Carburp, but the Carbanak gang had heavily modified and improved it. It worked as a remote administration tool, giving the hackers complete control over the infected machine. It could log keystrokes, steal passwords, and transfer files. In some cases, to further avoid detection, the gang even digitally signed their malware to make it appear as legitimate, trusted software. Think of it like this. The bank is a secure skyscraper. The hackers didn't try to blow a hole in the wall. They just tricked a mailroom clerk into accepting a package. Inside was a spy who put on a maintenance uniform and was then free to wander the building, completely unnoticed. They now had a foothold. They were inside the network, silent and invisible. Phase 1 of the heist was complete. The next phase, the one that made Carbanak legendary, was about to begin, and it involved doing nothing more than watching. Once the Carbanak malware was inside a bank's network, the hackers did something remarkable. Absolutely nothing. They didn't immediately try to steal money or transfer funds. They didn't cause chaos or trigger alarms. They just waited, and they watched. For weeks, sometimes months, the hackers were silent observers, conducting a patient and meticulous reconnaissance mission from thousands of miles away. This was the true genius of the Carbanak operation. They understood that every bank is different, with its own unique software, internal procedures, and security protocols. A brute force attack would be noisy and easily caught. To pull off the perfect crime, they needed to become perfect insiders. They had to learn the language, the rhythm, and the culture of the bank they were about to rob. Their primary tool for this was one of Carbanak's most powerful features, the ability to capture video of an employee's screen. Imagine a bank administrator who handles wire transfers. They sit at their desk, log in, and start their work. They open the bank's software, navigate menus, enter authorization codes, and approve transactions. Unbeknownst to them, every single click, every keystroke, every mouse movement is being recorded and streamed to a server controlled by the hackers. The criminals were essentially looking over the shoulder of the bank's own staff, getting a private, real-time training session on how to use the bank's most sensitive systems. They learned which forms to fill out, which buttons to press, and what security checks were in place. But they didn't stop there. Gaining access to one computer was just the start. Their goal was to reach the digital heart of the bank, the computers of system administrators who could access everything, from the SWIFT network for international transfers to the systems controlling the ATMs. To do this, they used a technique called lateral movement, using the first infected computer as a launchpad to jump to other machines on the network. And here again, they chose subtlety over force. Instead of obvious hacking tools, they used legitimate remote administration software like MEadmin, tools a bank's own IT department would use for troubleshooting. By using the bank's own tools against it, their activity blended in with normal, day-to-day network traffic, making it almost impossible to spot. They were like chameleons, changing their colors to match their surroundings. The level of patience they showed was extraordinary. In some cases, they would spend 2 to 4 months just observing before making a single move. During this time, they weren't just learning the software, they were learning the people. They saw how employees communicated. They learned what time of day certain transactions were usually processed. They figured out who had the authority to approve large transfers. They were building a complete operational blueprint of the bank. This long reconnaissance phase served two critical purposes. First, it gave them the knowledge to perfectly mimic a real employee, ensuring their fraudulent transactions wouldn't raise red flags. Second, it allowed them to find the most efficient and least risky ways to get the money out. They weren't just looking for a way in, they were looking for the perfect way out. They had become digital ghosts, indistinguishable from the bank's own staff, ready to orchestrate a theft that the bank's own systems would process as just another day at the office. The hackers had become digital insiders, and they were about to turn that knowledge into millions in untraceable cash. They had the keys to the kingdom. But before we reveal the ingenious methods they used to turn the bank's own systems against them, it's worth taking a moment to think about our own digital security. The same tactics used against these massive banks, like phishing emails, are used against people every single day. If you want to learn how to protect yourself from these kinds of threats, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell. We cover stories just like this every week to help you stay safe online. After months of silent observation, it was time to cash out. The Carbanak gang were now masters of their victims' systems. They knew the procedures, they had the admin passwords, and they were ready to conduct their cash-out symphony. They didn't rely on a single method of theft. They used at least 3 distinct techniques to extract money, each tailored to the target and designed to minimize detection. Their first method was the most cinematic: ATM jackpotting. This was digital magic. The hackers, now in control of the bank's internal network, could access the systems managing the ATMs. They could issue commands to any machine from anywhere in the world without ever touching it. The plan was executed with military precision. A hacker, sitting at a computer thousands of miles away, would schedule a remote command for a specific ATM to start dispensing cash at a precise time. Simultaneously, a money mule on the ground would get a message. This mule was a foot soldier, often recruited from local crime networks. The instructions were simple: be at the ATM on the corner of Main and Elm at 11 o'clock p.m. sharp. The mule would arrive, wait, and exactly at the appointed time, the ATM would start spewing out money. The mule simply collected the cash, no card, no PIN, no interaction needed, and walked away. From a security camera's view, it just looked like the machine had malfunctioned. This was repeated at dozens of ATMs across multiple cities, a distributed, ghost-like withdrawal that was impossible for the bank to trace in real time. One bank lost an estimated $7.3 million this way alone. The second method was even more subtle and aimed for much larger sums: the database heist. Instead of manipulating machines, the hackers manipulated the numbers themselves. They would get into the bank's core accounting systems, the central ledgers tracking every customer's balance. With admin rights, they could just edit the database. They'd find a dormant or low activity account with, say, a $1,000 balance. Then, with a few keystrokes, they'd change that balance to $10,000. To the bank's system, nothing was wrong. The money hadn't been moved. It had just appeared. The hackers would then immediately transfer the phantom $9,000 to an account they controlled, often at another bank in another country. The original account holder wouldn't notice, as their $1,000 was still there. It was the perfect crime-stealing money that, until a moment before, didn't even exist. The books remained balanced, and the theft was only discoverable through a deep, manual audit, long after the money was laundered and gone. The third method was the most direct, using the bank's own infrastructure for high-value international transfers. Having watched employees for months, the hackers knew exactly how to use the SWIFT network, the global system banks use to send trillions of dollars between each other daily. They'd wait for the right moment, often after business hours or on a holiday, and use their stolen admin credentials to log into the SWIFT transfer system. They would then execute what looked like a legitimate, multi-million-dollar wire transfer, sending funds from the bank's own accounts directly to mule accounts set up in countries like China and the United States. To the receiving bank, it was just another SWIFT transfer. By the time the sending bank realized it was fraud, the money had already been withdrawn and had vanished into a complex web of money laundering. One financial firm lost a staggering $10 million this way. This wasn't just a series of random robberies. It was a globally coordinated operation. While one team was jackpotting ATMs in Ukraine, another was inflating balances in Russia, and a third was executing fraudulent SWIFT transfers in Germany. The money was laundered just as quickly, converted into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, or used to buy luxury cars and houses, making it nearly impossible to trace. For nearly 2 years, the Carbanak gang operated with impunity, their cash-out symphony playing on a global stage while the world's financial institutions had no idea they were being robbed blind. While the Carbanak gang was amassing a fortune, the digital breadcrumbs they left behind were slowly being collected. The investigation, spearheaded by Kaspersky Lab, quickly turned into a global manhunt. This was a new kind of police work for a new kind of criminal. The crime scene wasn't a bank branch. It was a server. The getaway car wasn't a vehicle. It was an encrypted data packet. To catch these ghosts, law enforcement agencies from around the world had to unite. The call went out. Interpol and Europol stepped in to coordinate the massive international effort. The FBI, the Spanish National Police, and authorities from Romania, Belarus, and Taiwan all joined the hunt. It was a coalition of the world's top cyber cops focused on a single, shadowy target. Private cybersecurity companies also shared intelligence, creating an unprecedented public-private partnership to dismantle the world's most successful cybercrime group. The challenges were immense. The Carbanak group was decentralized and anonymous, with members scattered across Russia, Ukraine, and China. They hid their communications behind layers of encryption and anonymizing services. The money trail was a labyrinth, winding through shell companies and crypto exchanges designed to hide the final destination of the stolen funds. Investigators had to trace command and control servers back through a maze of proxies. They analyzed malware samples, looking for coding quirks or reused code that could link the attacks and maybe point to the authors. They also started putting pressure on the money mule networks, knowing the foot soldiers are often the weakest link. For years, the gang seemed untouchable, but even the most sophisticated criminals make mistakes. After a long and painstaking investigation, the breakthrough finally came. Spanish authorities, working with Europol and the FBI, zeroed in on a suspect living in Alicante, Spain. They believed this man was a key figure, the suspected mastermind behind the Carbanak operations. In March 2018, the trap was sprung. The Spanish National Police raided the suspect's home. The man they arrested was a Ukrainian national identified as Dennis K. Police seized computers, jewels worth over $500,000, and luxury cars. They had finally captured the alleged leader of the world's most prolific digital bank robbing crew. This arrest triggered a cascade of law enforcement actions. In the following months, more members of the syndicate were caught. 3 other Ukrainian nationals, Dmytro Fedorov, Fedor Halater, and Andrei Kolpakov, were apprehended. These men were allegedly part of a notorious and highly active division of the gang known as Fin7, which had also targeted the restaurant and hospitality industries. Fedor Halater, considered a high-level manager, was eventually extradited to the U.S. and sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2021. The global dragnet was closing. The arrest proved that international cooperation could overcome the borderless nature of cybercrime. The anonymity the hackers had hidden behind was finally stripped away. While the arrest didn't recover all the stolen money, they shattered the Carbanak gang's leadership and sent a powerful message to cybercriminals everywhere. No matter how deep you hide in the digital shadows, you can be found. The capture of the suspected mastermind and key operatives was a major victory, but the story doesn't end there. The final tally from the heist is still debated. The most cited figure is around $1 billion, but the true number is likely much higher. Many banks, fearing damage to their reputation and a loss of customer confidence, likely absorb the losses quietly instead of reporting the breaches. The billion-dollar heist may well be a conservative estimate, but Carbanak's true legacy isn't the money they stole. It's how they fundamentally changed the landscape of cybercrime. Before Carbanak, most financial cybercrime targeted customers. Hackers stole credit card numbers, fished for banking passwords, and tricked individuals. The banks themselves were seen as fortresses. Carbanak shattered that illusion. They proved it was not only possible but far more profitable to go right to the source. Why rob 1 million customers for $1 each when you can rob one bank for millions? They were also pioneers in using the techniques of government-level spies for criminal profit. The methods they used: patient reconnaissance, lateral movement, custom malware, and long-term stealth are hallmarks of what's known as an advanced persistent threat, or APT. Previously, these were the tools of spies stealing state secrets. Carbanak commercialized the APT, showing that the most sophisticated hacking techniques could be used to get rich. In the aftermath, the entire financial industry was forced into a painful reevaluation of its security. The old model of building a strong perimeter, a powerful firewall to keep bad guys out, was proven obsolete. Carbanak showed that determined attackers will always find a way in. The new model became assumed breach. Security shifted from just prevention to detection and response. Banks had to invest heavily in systems that could spot strange behavior and identify a threat that was already inside the walls. The Carbanak gang may have been dismantled, but their ghost still haunts the financial system. The malware they created is still in the wild, its tactics studied and copied by a new generation of cybercriminals. In fact, variants of Carbanak have been seen in recent years, adapted for new purposes like ransomware attacks. The group itself splintered, with smaller cells continuing to target the financial sector. The arrest of the mastermind was the end of a chapter, not the end of the story. The Carbanak playbook is now standard reading for financially motivated hackers everywhere. And it leaves us with a chilling, unanswered question. The most famous ghost was caught. But how many others are still out there? How many silent watchers are inside the world's financial networks right now, patiently learning the systems, watching the screens, and waiting for the perfect moment to launch the next billion-dollar heist? The story of Carbanak is a stark reminder that in the 21st century, the biggest heists don't happen in a vault. They happen on a server. If you found this story fascinating, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the digital front lines. Let us know in the comments. What part of the Carbanak heist did you find the most clever? The patient video surveillance, the ATM jackpotting, or the database trick that created money out of thin air? Thanks for watching.